old. It was not long until I became one of the youngest successful women in the country. But I always had to be careful. I managed my work from home because I hated air conditioners. My employees always wanted to have a meeting with me, but I couldn't. Most of the time I had online business meetings, and if I had to go, I would wear clothes that looked ridiculous in summer, and even in the winter. I became rich, and I was able to help my parents quit their jobs and retire. But I was lonely. I didn't have the courage to date other men because of what happened with Hudson. But then I met Zane. We met at a business conference for young entrepreneurs. The conference was in Hawaii, which was perfect for me. I went to the beach every afternoon and sunbathed without getting into the water. So one afternoon, Zane approached me and asked, "Are you afraid of the water?" I looked at him suspiciously and asked with a cautious tone, "What do you mean?" But he simply said, "I've been watching you for a couple of days and you never seem to go in. The water is lovely, you know." I immediately took a deep breath. His comment was innocent, and for the first time in my life, I felt like sharing. So I said, "I can't. If I go in there, I might die." Zane was shocked and interested in hearing the whole story. So I told him. He was so compassionate towards me. We ended up talking all afternoon and then spending all of our time together. We started dating for a while and then we got married. I was so happy with the way things turned out. I thought I finally had my happy ending. I was rich, I had everything I needed, and I had a loving husband who really cared for me. But then I woke up one night to drink some water, and I noticed that Zane wasn't next to me. And before I got to the kitchen, I heard his voice coming from his office. "It's not the right time yet. She's totally in love with me, but I need more time until she trusts me with her money." I felt like an elephant sat on my chest. Was Zane planning something behind my back? I heard his footsteps, so I rushed back to my bed and pretended to be asleep. But my heart was pounding. The next day, I acted like everything was okay. We had breakfast like usual, and I even kissed him goodbye. But as soon as he left the house, I called a private detective and asked him to investigate Zane. And what I found was shocking. Zane was Sierra's personal assistant. She was in the conference in Hawaii and saw me there. And when she knew that I became richer than her, she teamed up with Zane so they could rob me, or at least get half of my fortune when we got a divorce. I couldn't believe that Sierra still held a grudge after all these years. I also felt sick to my stomach. The only man that I invited to my life wanted to hurt me. I was so in love with him that for a second I thought that I could convince him to forget about Sierra and to stay with me. But I was smarter than that. So I took all the evidence that the detective collected and I hired a lawyer. I had to divorce him. Zane was shocked when he saw the divorce papers. He couldn't get a penny from me because I threatened him that if he asked for money, I would send all the evidence to the police and he would be in jail. As for Sierra, I threatened her with the same thing. I told her that if she ever tried to mess with me again, I would ruin her life. Sierra was terrified by the idea of jail, and she paid me $2 million to keep my mouth shut. I sold the house Zane and I used to live in, and I went to live with my parents so I could raise my child in peace. Yes, I found out after the divorce that I was pregnant with a baby girl. I called her Amy. I was thrilled when I had her. Amy was so beautiful. She had Zane's eyes and chin, but unfortunately, she had my disease. We found that out when she turned 7 years old. I cried my eyes out that day. She was playing with her friends outside. One of them opened the plastic water pipe and aimed it at her. The water was cold, and she soon developed a rash. Her friends started screaming when they saw her. I rushed outside and I held her in my arms and took her to the hospital. A nice doctor treated her. I explained to him her condition and he calmed me down. He told me to get out of the room so he could treat her. Luckily, 2 hours later, the doctor got out and assured me that Amy had made it. She needed to stay a few more days in the hospital. I let out a sigh of relief and I thanked the doctor who couldn't take his eyes off me. The following days, he came by every day to say hi and check up on us. And on our last day in the hospital, he came over to me and said, "I kind of need to see Amy more. Can I visit her? Or would you prefer telling me more about her over a date?" I felt butterflies in my stomach. It had been 7 years since I went out with any man, so I said yes. 2 days later, I took Amy and went to meet the doctor in the park. We decided that it would be more fun if the first date was a fun one. Amy also needed to breathe fresh air. But while we were playing with her on the sand, I noticed that someone was watching me from afar. I looked closely, and it was Zane. He was looking back and forth between Amy and me. I knew that he figured out that Amy was his. You see, I never told him that I was pregnant. I grabbed Amy's hands abruptly and apologized to the doctor, who looked confused with my strange behavior. I went home and I immediately booked 2 flight tickets to California. I will never let him take my child.